I met Eddy a few weeks ago, I guess, right, Eddy? And I can't say enough, the most gracious guy. Thank you for coming all the way from France. This is our first international keynote speaker, so that's pretty exciting. So Eddy is a St. Louis native and the acclaimed author of Mississippi Solo, Native Stranger, and other works that explore identity, race, and belonging. I love the quote from USA Today that we have there on the screen. Eddy Harris isn't your everyday tourist. His travels almost always have a purpose to write about not only what he sees, but what he feels. A lifelong seeker and adventurer, Eddy left home at 16 to roam the backroads of America, later venturing through Europe, Latin America, and Africa. And though he has traveled to every continent but one, his writings remain rooted in the American experience, seen through the eyes of the intimate outsider. His work is known for its honesty, insight, and unflinching look at race and humanity. After years of early failures as a writer, which I did not write, that came from Eddy. I would never call him an early failure. But Eddy found his voice in 1985 when he canoed the Mississippi River, a journey that became Mississippi Solo, and launched his career as a writer. Eddy later revisited that voyage in 2014, not 1914. That would be a little, wow. Good for you, Eddy. 1914. Eddy revisited that voyage in 2014, producing and directing the award-winning documentary River to the Heart. Also a former professor of Black American literature, Eddy continues to use story and travel to reveal the deeper currents of culture and self. Eddy has been a lifelong friend of Big Mighty Adventures and graciously flew halfway around the world just to be here today. So Eddy, please come on up and say hello.
I wish I looked like that guy in that picture. I thought about calling this little talk A Call in the Wild, but then I thought better of it. I don't want to give anybody the idea that it's a good idea to have smartphones in the wild. In fact, I don't think smartphones are a good idea anywhere. Not only do they make us dependent, the whole idea behind them seems to be to make us stupider. And I don't want any device that is smarter than I am. Even if in the modern world, we're almost forced to own and use one. Our wallets are on them, our subway tickets, our bus tickets are on them, our forwarding cards are on them, our maps, our personal data, and all sorts of encyclopedic information, all at a few touches of a finger. I remember when I took my first canoe journey down the Mississippi, and my good friend Walter suggested that I take a second canoe. Kind of like a spare tire tethered to the first canoe, like a mountain man's pack mule pulled behind. Since I had had no prior experience in a canoe, it was a safety measure, I assume. Walter was afraid for my safety, although what a second canoe would have done for me, I do not know. Whatever had happened to the first canoe would certainly have happened to the second. After I made my second trip down the Mississippi, people assumed I'd taken along a smartphone, maybe again for the safety factor, in case I got lost along the way. Although how one could get lost on a river going only one way was beyond me. Or in case perhaps some disaster happened and I needed to contact the outside world to come and save me. However, it never would have occurred to me to take a smartphone. First of all, I don't use a smartphone. Second of all, making or answering a call in the wild seemed utterly absurd to me. I was in that canoe to answer a call to the wild. And the freedom I sought was the freedom to disengage, to disconnect from cell phones and smartphones and computers and engines of every kind and put myself out there to discover. It's not that I wanted to disengage completely from the exterior world. I'm neither hermit nor misanthrope, and there would be contact. I knew that. As it turned out, any engagements, any connections, and there were plenty. A few not so good ones, naturally. People, after all, don't stop being people because you're in a canoe or because you're on the river. But the gross majority of them were real connections, the kind that make you wonder if people in fact live a kind of double existence, professing one thing, but living their lives almost counter to what they would seem to profess. Let me just give you one quick example. From my second canoe journey down the river, I met a woman in Iowa. It was the kind of day that a canoeist dreams about and finds perfect. A non-whitewater canoeist, at any rate. The water was smooth and calm, and it glistened like glass. What little breeze there was just enough to cool a warm day and evaporate the sweat off my skin. And it came at an angle that did not hinder or hamper my paddling or alter my direction. It was a beautiful evening, and just before the sun disappeared, completely beyond the trees, some game warden type comes puttering out from a hidden slough and catches up to me. And as will happen, we started talking. I hung onto his boat, and we chatted, drifting along, talking about one thing and another. And before we separated, he offered me several packets of MREs, meals ready to eat. And then he went on his merry way. It was late, and I was in a groove, and I didn't want to stop. And by the time I did, it was dark, dark, dark. Too dark and too dangerous to continue. Too dark to see, too dark to even try and find a safe place to pull out and pitch my tent, build a fire, make something to eat, and go to sleep. In front of me, where the river makes an almost 90-degree turn to the east, there was a town, and I decided I would make for it. Clayton, Iowa. Small town, practically closed up for the season. Not many lights on, but just a few. I could easily have pitched my tent at the foot of that town, and no one would have disturbed me. No one would have even seen me. But there was a Hitchcockian hotel, straight out of the movie Psycho. And there was a light on in the kitchen, and I decided to walk up and see about getting a room. I don't know why. The hotel was closed, of course, for the season, just like the rest of the town, but I saw a woman cooking in the kitchen. And I knocked on the door anyway, and when she opened it, the first thing out of my head was, "What's for dinner?" I don't know why. Nothing remarkable, but imagine a big black man comes to your door, knocks on it in the dark of night in Iowa, in a small town in Iowa, and the woman opening the door to you, a white woman, a woman of a certain age, and no bigger than a corn nubbin, she fires back without hesitation, her voice straightforward and no nonsense, "I'm making soup." She was so nonplussed that it was me who was taken aback. It was as if she was expecting big black men to come off the river every night and knock on her door. Indeed, after a little chat, she did open a room, and she negotiated the price down. 20 minutes or so later, after I had taken a shower, settled in, there was a knock on the door. The soup was ready. Or how about a towboat captain in Arkansas? Don was his name, and he was a racist a bigot as you could hope to find. And how do I know he was a racist bigot? He was not like those shotgun-toting hunters who intruded into my camp one night and with their threatening gestures and implied threats left me guessing as to their intentions. and their motives, racist or merely violent or merely pranksterish, I'll never know. Don, on the other hand, left no doubt. He told me so. He came right out and said he didn't like black people. But we drank beers together, and we talked long into the night, and he gave me a place on his towboat to sleep, and when I left him the next day, he practically cleared out his galley cupboards to make sure I had stuff to eat to carry away with me. Having a smartphone would have been like traveling not solo, almost like having a traveling companion, someone or something to keep me company and keep me occupied and unbored. I did not realize this as I was setting out, but having someone else along would have changed the entire dynamic of this trip. Having someone to keep me company, someone to talk to, would have put me inside a bubble of companionship. I hope that's bourbon you're about to offer me.
Just for you, yeah. It's not bourbon. Just mine.
In a bubble of companionship, which would have not have been a bad thing, but I would have missed Don, and I would have missed Eileen, the woman in Iowa, who might not have been so courageous and so generous had we been two. And Don certainly would not have revealed the secrets he revealed to me had I not been alone. Smartphone. And I might not have been as receptive to all of those people waving me to shore, wanting to talk to me, wanting to ask me about the trip, wanting to know what the heck I was doing. I needed those people. I needed the kind of solitude that would invite them all into that canoe with me. That probably sounds like something of a contradiction, needing solitude, wanting to be alone, and at the same time needing the kind of connections I sought, although I'm not sure I set out needing those connections. I set out seeking a connection with myself. If you've read Mississippi Solo, and you should, you will know that I had hardly been in a canoe before that trip. A couple of float trips on the Black and on the Current was about it, drifting mostly, drinking beers, and paddling occasionally to keep from dragging bottom or getting hung up in the trees overhanging the river. I was a long way from being an expert when I put in at the headwaters of the Mississippi. 2,500 miles along the Mississippi, for someone used to being in a canoe, it's a challenge. For a tyro, it's an exploit. A challenge too, but a test of a different kind. As an expert, you know you can do it. Barring an accident or something going wildly wrong, it's an endurance event. Question of degree. If you can run a 10K, you can run a marathon, as long as you keep your head in the game. But a marathon for a beginning runner requires something else entirely. And one of the things it requires is a sense of need. That need might come in many forms. It might be to prove something to yourself or to someone else, or to show the way, to encourage others, to show them that it can be done. If I can do it, anyone can do it. As it was in my case, the need to look inside yourself and see who you are, and see what you are capable of, and how you deal with the unknown and with fatigue and with failure. If in the end you cannot do it, cannot do what you set out to do. I live now in a very small rural community. There are not many people. But even there, except in the middle of the night, when I go out to sit on a bench and gaze up at the stars, you're never really alone. The occasional car passes. You know people are in the houses that you can see. A light comes on, a dog barks. In much bigger cities, you can't be alone at all. Distractions galore, people and noise all the time, everywhere. And not even the stars to sit under and contemplate. There is no uninterrupted time, no space for deep self-examination, no time for question, no time to answer those questions, time and space to think about and discover who you are, and more importantly, who and how you want to be. It is true, and this applies to hiking and to climbing and to skiing, to me anyway, to fly fishing, and to any of those activities which are so active in nature and which are so rhythmic and so dynamic that the brain almost disconnects from the activity, and you come out of yourself, and you can do the deep breathing, deep thinking, hypnotic spell kind of contemplation that is both therapeutic and self-revelatory. For that, I needed to be alone, all alone, and I didn't realize it at the time. In fact, I asked my friends to come along. No one wanted to accompany me. Everyone thought I was crazy. That's when I knew it was the right idea. And once into the adventure, that's when I knew I had to do it alone. The worst day of my trip, in fact, came the day my brother decided to come along with me. I had arrived in St. Louis thinking, in fact, that I was going to stop there. Went home to have a shower and a meal. And once I decided I could not stop there, my brother was so excited by the stories that I had told about the journey so far, he decided he wanted to come along the rest of the way. He was my big brother. He had helped me time and time again through much of the adversity I had faced as a failed writer. In fact, it was his $75 I had in my pocket when I had set out. How could I say no to my big brother? First day out, he talked. And he talked. And he talked some more. We had taken off in the early morning when the river was covered in mist. We couldn't see much, but we could hear, and every unfamiliar sound made him freak out. A log that passed in front of us, he freaked out. If something bumped into the canoe, he was ready to jump out. It was horrible. The bubble of serenity and solitude I had fashioned was shattered, and he ached and he complained and he talked and he talked and he kept talking. Luckily, our first day out was our last day out. We put ashore at a town just south of here, and my brother got out for good and went home. He recognized that such things were not for him. The river does that too. The wild, the adventure, the risks. They're not for everyone, and there is no shame in recognizing what is and what is not for you. A little time for self-reflection, a little time for introspection. And if you allow yourself that space, when you are alone on the river or in the woods or atop the mountain, and you allow yourself to look into yourself, you will see yourself openly and honestly and without fear, for there is no one else there to see you naked. If I had not been in the depths of despair, I likely never would have set out on such an adventure. Like my brother, I probably would have said that such things were not for me, in part because I had no experience with such things, in part because no one I knew did such things either. In other words, no exposure equals no experience. It makes sense. I was a city boy. The smell of asphalt after a hard rain was about as close to the smells of nature as I had ever gotten. The only green spaces were the parks we could run around in and play in and throw a ball in. As long as we were home by dark, not exactly calls to the wild. After the river trip and after Mississippi Solo had been published, Outside Magazine asked me to write a piece that would examine and try to understand why there seemed to be a dearth of blacks and people of color participating in certain outdoor activities. Why, despite my love of the smell of wet asphalt, why, in fact, it would never have occurred to me to go off to the woods all by myself. Whether we're talking about big game hunting, skiing, canoeing big rivers and small, the reasons lie at the intersections of economics and culture and race. Not exclusively one thing or another, but a combination of factors which point to a lack of exposure and to a lack of example. To go skiing, you have to get to the slopes, pay for lodgings, pay for meals, buy lift tickets, rent equipment. Skiing is expensive. And you have to like the cold and snow. I have a fly rod that I bought. If I bought it today, it would cost hundreds of dollars. To use it, I have to travel to decent trout waters. Sleeping bags, tents, camp cooking gear. Luckily, I knew where I could borrow the canoe. My friend Walter, the same guy with the second canoe, lent me the tent. Otherwise, I could not have made the trip. It was beyond the realm of my experience. There was a financial cost to such activities, other prices to pay as well. Out on the river one night, those two men described in Mississippi Solo as a couple of shotgun-toting racist rednecks stumbled into my camp to harass me. You don't have to be black to worry about such things, about shotgun-toting rednecks, about all kinds of dangers that can happen in racial ways or not. But if you're black, in the back of the mind looms the specter of James Byrd, a young man snatched by a trio of good old boys as he was walking down a Texas road, tied up with chains and dragged to death behind a pickup truck. And speaking of that old lady in Iowa, a young woman, Renisha McBride, knocked on a door in Detroit looking for help after she had been in a car accident. When the door opened, the man behind the door shotgun blasted her to death. And just the other day, a cleaning woman went to the wrong house, and the shot came through the door and killed her. I was invited to address such issues with the Nature Conservancy some years back. The topic of discussion was how to make green spaces more inviting, and especially urban green spaces. What they failed to take into account was the fact that while bushes make spaces more pleasant to look at, they also offer places to hide for some perp. If we don't take such realities into account, how do we encourage more people, especially people who don't ordinarily have access and don't have exposure to hunting, fishing, hiking, climbing, skiing, and canoeing? How do we get those people to care about the environment in any way that is concrete, in any way that is not abstract? Hunters care about the wild world because without it, there would be nothing to hunt, nothing to fish without clean, fast-flowing, clean water for trout, nowhere to ski if the weather gives us droughts instead of rain and snow. No hiking, no black men canoeing down the Mississippi River, no time alone for contemplation and serenity in the woods if those woods are perceived as something more dangerous because of gun-toting rednecks than because of the elements or grizzlies. If we care about the wild world in somewhat contradictory fashion, meaning that we don't want the great outdoors to become like Venice, with gigantic ocean liners dumping boatloads of sightseers crowding the pathways and the waterways that offer a bit of seclusion, then we must allow access to the wild world in order to preserve it. We must invite others, especially those for whom the wild world is indeed another world separate from theirs, and therefore a world they will likely care little about, since they don't know it and don't feel it and don't think it is theirs. We must invite them and share with them what we have come to love and appreciate. I was in the proverbial depths of despair when I canoed the river the first time. 8 years as a writer with nothing to show for it. I set out thinking that if I died, it would be no big loss. The Mississippi River and the solitude and the camaraderie, even the dangers overcome, saved my life, saved my soul, saved my spirit. Along the way, I not only discovered what I was made of, what I could overcome, and what I could learn. I discovered a world that was entirely new to me, this wild world which deserves to be preserved and deserves to be shared. Because it has so much to teach us if we care to learn and to listen about ourselves, about that wild world, about this country, about each other, and about all the intertwining connections which make us whole. Thank you.